Hello and welcome to the When Calls the Heart After Show here on JLJ Media. I am the JLJ of JLJ Media. It never gets old. Say it 5 times fast, though. I'm James Lott Jr. Welcome to the show. I am so excited because, this season, because of the strikes, I couldn't have any of my friends on because of the strikes this season. But we had Brian Bird on, of course, at the end of the season. And now I get to have one of the writers and the showrunner on the show. She worked on one of my favorite shows of all time, Joan of Arcadia. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that. Just have to. But we're talking about When Calls the Heart, of course. Help me welcome Miss Lindsay Sturman. Hi, Miss Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So I do want to start with Joan of Arcadia really quick. So what did you do on that show? Exactly. What was your role on that show?
I think it was my first job, and I was so lucky to be on that show. I think it's on, you can find it like on Amazon and, YouTube. It's such a great show. So yeah, I was just one of the writers. So
I love the premise. Amber Tamlin, I knew from General Hospital first. This amazing young actress comes from Russ Tamlin. It's a whole other story. I mean, it's her father. All that, but you had young Jason Ritter. The cast was like was amazing. So so you said you were a writer on the show. So the theme was, other kind of, for some people, otherworldly or Christian faith based. It was on regular network television. How was it writing for that type of show back then for network television?
it was so inspiring because it was a faith-based show, Joan of Arc, Joan of Arcadia, which is a small town in California. And the creator of the show, who's just so brilliant, Barbara Hall, she had a real journey of faith. She had converted to Catholicism as an adult and had worked with a nun and studied. And I think that inspired her to write the show. And so we were, there was a cop element. Her dad was a cop.
Yes.
And, it was a high school show, right? So you had the high school stories, but then you had, God came to Joan every day in the body of a different person, because God is amongst us. God is one of us. And that incredible song that,
yes,
right. What if God were one of us? And, and so God, works in mysterious ways. So you just touched on one of my favorite episodes was God tells Joan to build a boat.
Yes. I remember that. Yes.
Do you remember the ending of it?
Yes, I do.
I cry every time I think
about it. Like a baby. a big black man. I cry. I just the falling heap. The symbolism is it's so good and big and dramatic and heavy and soft all at the same time to me.
Yeah. Should I tell the ending?
Oh, sorry for folks. Oh, yes, please tell me. I'm sorry. I'm saying because I love the show so much. I've seen all the episodes. Go ahead. Yeah, please tell me what the ending was. Yes.
So God tells Joan to build a boat, and teenager. So she builds this boat very badly. She has no idea what she's doing. There's going to be holes. But meanwhile, her brother, Jace, played by Jason Ritter, he'd been the high school football star, right? And he was I think maybe baseball, but this big shot. And the dad he kept books about all his clippings of being this rock star, in high school. And then he got in a car accident and he couldn't walk.
Oh, I remember that.
And so they had all this conflict, and they weren't speaking, because I think that Jason Ritter burns the book of like all the clippings of the high school, right, trophies.
Yes.
And they're not talking. And then I'm going to start crying. And then Joan builds this terrible boat it's full of holes in the garage. And then they're in this huge fight, the father and son in the garage. And then they look at this boat and they're like, what is she trying to do? And they start pulling off the bad nails and pulling them out, and they start rebuilding the boat together. And that's how they come back together and they bond. And
I know. And the thing about Jason Ritter, it was the first time I really got to see, because he was new. No, we didn't know who he was yet. Now he's somebody we know now. We know he's John Ritter's son, but we didn't really know him very well. That was one of the few episodes where I remember it was like, wow, he can really act.
Yeah.
Like when he has good material, he can act. I mean, there you go. When he has good material, he actually can deliver. Because I knew Amber could deliver. I knew some of the other. Anyway, I just wasn't sure about him. And that was one of the first episodes where I was like, yeah, he really is. He can act.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when you guys did that to him, I was like, he was in a wheelchair. I was like, well, like what happened? He was like that. Like, I saw there's symbolism here, James. There's symbolism here. You gotta follow along. So yes, I totally Yes, I get it. But I just love that show. I was a big fan, and when I saw it on your resume, I was like, I have to ask her about it. So thank you for sharing that. Because I always wondered, because back again, over the last 30 years, there's been a sprinkling on network TV, of faith-based shows. Most recently, God Friended Me. I don't know if you watched that. I love that show.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God Friended Me was on CBS for 3 seasons, and where God sent him a text, sent him a friend request, the lead character, and God was talking to him and leading him to people to help them out. And there's always a lesson, and it was this whole thing, but it's like God friended me. And there was one episode where God unfriended him. And it was like this whole thing with that. It was such a good show. It reminded me of Joan of Arcadia, that God is everywhere and God is everyone. That reminded me of Joan of Arcadia. So it was just kind of really interesting with that. But we had a few shows, there was obviously I'm looking up the big one, of course, that was oh my God, with Della Risa, and what's Touched by an Angel. One. There's a few that, Seventh Heaven kind of, so there's a few, but I thought it was just interesting to write for something, because network's not normally known for that.
Yeah, and it was and the West Wing had a lot of faith in it. Yes, so it was a really great moment in television where I think a lot of us felt that was going to be the direction, and it didn't. I think Joan sadly got canceled, and then and then the West Wing ran its course, but no, and it hasn't been till One Calls the Heart that I got to think about these themes and talk about them and write about them.
So that leads right into that, kid. So I want to know, how did this show come into you? Did you know of the show? Did you watch it beforehand? How did it come into your orbit?
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it, and I got a call that they were looking for a new showrunner, and so I actually Googled it while I was on the call, and I was like, oh wow, okay. So I start watching it, thinking I'll watch 1 or 2 episodes before I meet with them, and then I just binge watched.
That's how it is. Yep.
And then I started Googling, and I learned about the Hardys and that there's this incredible fan base, and I had come from Teen Wolf. And Teen Wolf has a very passionate fan base.
Yes, they do. My daughter's one of them. Yes, they do.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love Teen Wolf. And, I just knew how, and it's just so inspiring to write for a show when the fans really care about it.
What do you think, though? You're coming in like in a 10th, as you know, not all shows get 10 seasons.
Right.
So what were some of your thoughts when you okay, they asked me to come to this showrun, but in its 10th season?
I mean, I think that I was just mostly really excited, and I'd had taken some time off. I'd been, we'd had COVID and everything. And so I think it was this, it was just the humor. It's what you said. It mixes so many wonderful things at the same time. You're laughing, you're crying, there's romance. And it's so hard. It's so hard for a show to do that. And it's just so rare to have a show with this level of acting, level of writing, level of production values, and a fan base, it all happening at the same time, as you said, for 9 straight seasons is just so rare. So I think I was just really excited to come into, and it's a hard, first season shows are really hard. You're inventing it, and things can run very hot on a new show.
Yes, you know that. Yeah, that's very true. And this cast, we have a great cast. I mean, you can throw the ball to any of them and they deliver. So that must be delicious for you guys in the writer's room, that you could choose a storyline. I know they can handle it. I know, right? Or does it pose a problem because there's a large cast? Who do you go with? Is there how does that work for you guys on some level?
It's such a problem because there's too many. It's like we could do 2-hour episodes. We could do 24 of them. I mean, it's just, there's so many great stories to be told. And I'm trying to think if we had specific situations where every now and then you'll pick who's in a story based on kind of the other stories, and and then you'll write to those characters, and that, but it is fun to be like, oh, it could be, it could be Molly, it could be Florence. Well, what if it was Fiona? And you're trying to figure out, the pieces. And then one of the coolest things you get to do is put people together that haven't been together.
Yes, you did.
And then you get sparks sometimes.
Well, I'm going to talk about a couple of things I was very impressed with, actually, and I'll get that in a second. but I'm kind of doing this little linear thing here. I want to talk about the process, kind of. So, number one, what is a showrunner for folks who don't know what that means?
Yeah, great question. And there's no reason you would know because it's really confusing. And all the terms are like make no sense. So when at the end of the credits, you're going to see story editor, right? Executive story editor, supervising producer. Those are writers.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Right, they're writers. Right.
And so we're a very unionized, industry, which is great, right? We're all protected, and you work your way up because it's really an apprenticeship model. There's so much to learn, and writing, people can be very gifted, and that's a very real thing. It's also a skill set. So you learn, and I've been doing this for almost 25 years. So I have, and I've worked.
So you were 7 years old when you started. So just checking. Okay, yeah. You're a prodigy. Yeah. Okay.
But I've gotten to learn from David Shore, Jeff Davis. David Shore did House, and I worked for him on Battle Creek. And
I was on there. I was on House.
Right. I mean, amazing. And the skill set he taught me, I couldn't have ever figured it out. Right. And Jeff Davis, who just, from Teen Wolf, just understands how to rip your heart out. Right. That's what he does. And of course, Barbara Hall. So you learn all these skill sets. So that's why you have these, you start as a staff writer, story editor, executive, you work your way up. And then at some point not everybody, I think of myself sometimes as, I'm just a member of the band, right? And I come in and you ask me to play drums and I play drums and that's great. But sometimes you come in and they're like, you're going to be the number 2 person. And that's what it's called. And so you run the writer's room, or sometimes you do a lot of production. People have different skill sets. And that's why it's really nice to have a big group. And then when you're the showrunner, it's sort of the top, you run the writer's room and you translate everything to the actors and to production. So you're sort of the nexus, because you really have to figure out what should it be like that. What's, people say, what's the vision? What's the story? What should it feel like? And so you're kind of juggling a million things when you're the showrunner.
Yeah, and I figured, well, you're part producer, part director, part writer. You're all those things. Part wrangler, part all that stuff. Okay, so I know on soaps they have they have a lead, so to speak. I'm kind of showrunner there too, I guess. Then they have breakdown writers and they have script writers. They assign. So I don't know how's it work on your show, because I know Derek Thompson wrote some scripts. Some of you guys wrote scripts together. So like how does that work?
Yeah, and I'm always fascinated about how soaps work, because it's just incredible that you can get that much material
they do
out.
8 shows a week mostly.
Just can't.
One take. One take. Yes.
Oh, and that's how actors are incredible when they can do that.
150 pages a day. I mean, an episode. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And so we do a mishmash of like what you just said. So sometimes we'll work as a group, and it's called the writer's room. And some writers' rooms, we did it on Zoom because of COVID, but you might have a room which is covered with whiteboards, right? Like literally on every possible wall. And you write out the arcs, because you're trying to sort of get everything to go together. So you have everybody's character arcs, you have the story arcs, and then of course broken down into episodes, but it all has to come together. And you really want to know, you both build it, right, like a building, but you also want to have know where it's going to go. So it's very iterative, and you go back a lot. And then in terms of the writing, some shows group write. I was on Supergirl, and all those shows they're called that whole world there's one producer who's brilliant, and everybody group writes. Like there'll be 3 writers in every episode. It's just how they like to do it. And sometimes on some shows you send a writer off, especially like a Law and Order, you might send the writer off for 2 weeks, they come back, that's it, like nobody else helps them, right? And so it just depends on the show. But we do a lot of, sharing scenes, and we do sometimes, any writer can always pull another writer in and say, hey, we do a pass at this. I'm not finding this moment and I really want to do this, or if we're in a hurry, because it's really hard to write and edit on the same day. It's your brain, right? You need to like forget it and then come back to it fresh, and then you can kind of edit it. So working in pairs really helps.
Well, it's funny. I've done a few comedies, half-hour comedies, and sometimes they write on the set and say, "Here, James, here's your sides. You're like, I gotta learn this in 3 minutes. Okay, it's tough, and they're doing that. I mean, it's just I find I'm a writer myself. I just find writing fascinating. That's why I wanted to ask you about it. I just find it fascinating, the process. To put together, 'cause I want my viewers and Hardies to understand putting together a show isn't easy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hands. It's a lot of coordination, right? A
Mhm.
lot of that just to do a whole season, even if it's 12 episodes or 10 or 22 like they used to, or whatever, or 6 or whatever, you have to plan it out. You have to have a thing. But I want to ask you though, isn't there times though where because I know me as a writer, the story kind of just informs itself sometimes where you're like, I thought it might go this way, but I'm writing to the character is telling me the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a name for it. Jeff Davis, who created Teen Wolf, calls it the subconscious writer. And it's almost speaking to you, and you're following it sometimes more than you dictating it. Yeah.
Yes, I like that. No, I like it. I feel like I'm going on the journey. Well, as a writer, you're going on the journey too. It's kind of like we're going on the journey together. So
Yeah.
we'll still get to point B, but like we just like it. But it's like we add this in there, do that. It's really good. It's gonna be really good. So I love that myself. I love it's like rediscovering as you're writing. You're like, oh, that's
Yeah.
really great. So you had to pick up from season 9. So and you said you binge watched, but then with season 9, you watched that differently because you had to kind of remember stuff.
Yes, yes. And yeah, you go back a lot, and you watch different scenes to figure out, the storylines, like how they all pull through. And then you'll read a bunch of scripts too, because that really helps, because you're sort of taking it in different ways to understand,
Yeah.
the intentions and stuff like that.
One of the scenes that I really enjoyed, it's a couple of scenes, but one of the mini storylines I really enjoyed was the Maysu and Fiona talking about her grandmother's
Mhm.
potion, so to speak, for her face cream. And I've been watching the show since the beginning, and my ex co-host, who's still my friend, Marissa, is Asian, and we've always wanted Asian and Black representation on the show, and now we got it. Thank God. I'll talk about that in a second too. But with that scene, I just thought it was such a relatable, which When Calls Hard does this very well. It's such a relatable thing to anybody who's an immigrant. Whoever wrote that, I don't know who wrote that script or whatever. I should have looked it up. I didn't. But her little mini monologue about being afraid, coming here, reconnecting with her family in China, the whole thing of being scared, and Fiona being of course, Fiona would be worldly, and she's just like, I mean, she's like letting her speak, and she's respecting her, and she's affirming her. And the scene where she tells the woman, this is my grandmother's, recipe. I almost started crying because I was just like, this is something I wanted to see on When Calls the Heart, and I thought I wanted to mention that to you. That was really kudos to you. And then you have the Canfields, who everybody loves. I mean, like universally, which I love Viv and Natasha and everybody. And I love Amanda. I must say, I love Amanda too. They're all wonderful. So and they're so beloved, in their storyline arc of him working so much and working too hard and trying to be all things to everybody and stuff. I don't know. I don't know what my question is and all that. Just more of just like thank you for that. But are there thoughts about race in there at all when you're doing the writing? Because you have characters of different races on there.
Yeah, and a wonderful writer, Ayla Glass, wrote that episode. We try to be really thoughtful about it and really pull in. We have a consultant who does some of the faith, our faith consulting, and we worked with Tunette Powell, and she's a writer on season 11, and just an incredible thinker. And one of the things that she pointed out is that the show is very aspirational, and there's a concept of freedom dreams, and that it's not a story, because not all shows can do every story, right? It's just not, that's not in the show.
Right.
But that the show really was already telling these aspirational dreams of what if the world was different. And so that kind of, I think that her advice really helped us tell stories and we just constantly go back and look at them to make sure that we're not doing something that's thoughtless. And that was one of those stories that we put a ton of thought into. And
Yeah,
I'm glad you liked it. I loved
I
it.
did. It was really good, and also I loved the theme of womanhood and the episode. A guy not believing that Faith was a real doctor. There was some comedy in it, obviously with Hickam. There's always comedy with him, but that was the whole point. It was like you're kind of where she talks about that, where they just look at her differently. Because back then, I'm sure I can't even imagine what women went through back then in those kind of fields. So I was glad you guys did that too.
I love it when she says that when she cares more about healing him than, and I will say writing's a tough business. It's not easy. And I was the only girl. They'd be like, we need a girl for the writer's room. For like 10 years, I might be the only female in the room. So it's so I was glad but I love that she cares more than that she's able to just always be a doctor, which just speaks to, why his opinion was so ridiculous.
Right. Do no harm. Right. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's her oath. And I want to ask you a question. I'm going to go off on a side. Sorry if I'm on a side note, folks. This is very interesting. What have you learned being the only woman in many rooms? Because I know as myself, I was the only person of color in many rooms, only Black person in many rooms. I know it's taught me. What has it taught you?
That's a great question. I think that I don't know if got a lot of benefits from it. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard.
I know it's hard, girl. I know it's hard. I'm sure. I know it's hard. Ooh, I know it's hard. But I'm sure it makes you a stronger person. Obviously, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think it was. I was just in that moment where everything changed, right? Like there hadn't been any women or people of color in writers' rooms before that. And of course there were exceptions. I don't mean to say that, but in general. And so I think that people were getting used to it, but I also think that they were accepting and they were trying to, but I think the problem with TV and the problem with film is that we're not accountants. It's not like you punch in some numbers and there's a number and it says, boom, you did it right. There's a famous, you'll know this, quote that nobody knows anything in Hollywood. And right, it's William Goldman, right? The great, right? The Princess Bride. Yeah. And because of that, everything is open to interpretation. So it is harder, but at times have changed and that's good.
Yeah, no, it has. I know. Well, I feel like the answer I told people for me, I was like, I just did it. I was working. So, I mean, I was in the room. And my job was to be in that room and work, right? That was your job. You're in the room. Yeah. It was your job to do your job. So, so that's kind of the thing. It's like when I was raising my kids, like, how do you raise kids and go to college? Like, you just do it. Right. You know what I mean? You just do it. I mean, I wish I had some philosophical answer. I was like, I just figured it out. That's how they did. And they stayed alive. So they're great. So that's all I know. And your shows, they stay alive. They get to go to birth. But thanks for answering. I was just curious. That was when you said that. I was like, "That's very interesting." That you're right. It has changed a lot, though. Thank God. And we have female head writers and female producers. I mean, things are all changing. It's really great. So now you're on this already hit network show on cable. Was there any trepidation for yourself joining a hit show? It's going because I mean it's different. Like I said, it's different when you're starting a show. It's its own birthing process, you know what I mean, or show that's failing, you're brought in to save it. That's a whole other process too. But was there any trepidation they coming into a show? It's a hit. You think I don't want to mess it up. I want to make sure everything's fine. Like, what was your thoughts?
Yeah, no, you have to be. And I was so grateful to have Derek and Beth and Allie there, and all the actors and the crew, so that we could always make sure, because there are moments when I wouldn't have known. For instance, when it was someone first pitched out the idea of Henry Gowan being Goldie's godparent, I was like, that's crazy. And so we sort of turned that into the story. I was like, are you insane? But then Allie, I think it was Allie who was like, no, this is why. And I was like, oh, you're right. So it's just great to have. But no, you really want to be careful of, just not, you've got the, the canon, right? Everything that you've seen. So you want to make sure that that's as correct, but it's also, you also want to make sure that, you're stepping into really big shoes. I mean, it's a huge show. It's people really care about it. It's a really important show, so that you're just thoughtful about everything.
Henry Gowan, I will say, I think that's one of the storylines we all agree on. So well done. So, I mean, Martin Cummings deserves like 10 Emmys. He did such great quiet work, I call it. As you know, if folks who watch my reaction shows, I talk about that, how just quietly he has grown into this person that you like. I mean, from where he first started, like you said, when he first started to now, you're like, what? But it works. So congratulations on that storyline arc, since I'm bringing Rosaline back and all that. So bringing back a long time, I mean, from someone when she was a kid on the show last, How inspired was that? I mean, that was wonderful. It's the
And
same actress
again,
and everything.
I think it was Allie, Derek, and Beth, and they, they just know the fans, and they were there. Derek was there,
Yeah, it was there,
for season 2, so he just has such a long memory of everything. And although she was season 1, but yeah, I think that it's the Henry Gowan. I just think he that's one of those journeys that's just once in a lifetime. You don't see those on TV, and you go back and you look, and you cannot believe how horrible he was. It's like
Oh, I
I
know.
forgot.
He was bad. He was no, we didn't like
Yeah.
him. We didn't like him. Yes.
And I think that I think there's more story there, just because I think that kind of healing, that what the journey he's going through has so many steps. And I think it's just, I think it's so human. It's we all go through these, we all have regrets. We all have, I have failed many times, and and right. And it's really just making sense of that.
Yeah. And I know you can't say nothing, but all of us are like Abigail. Because that's all I'm gonna say. We can't tell me, I don't do spoilers. But I thought it was very cool because she's been mentioned off and on here and there, and that's and the relation. When he was like, I look across the, I'm sitting here at my desk, and I look, it was just so beautiful. It was so beautifully written. It was the words. I think it's like, you have a good actor, great, but it's the words that really brought it to life. So kudos to your writers. It was just such
But
a
you
good.
know what? He really got involved with that scene. And I actually asked him if it's okay to share the story with another in another interview. And he wrote parts of it and sent it to me, like pictures of it.
That's
And,
cool.
and it was so beautiful because he knows his character better than anybody could ever. I mean, he just so embodies that character. And he keeps a letter in the pocket of his jacket from Abigail. Like right, that's his choice. Like nobody knows that.
Right.
So being able, that's 10 seasons. That's like when you have actors who know their characters so well and care so much that they're not phoning that in, right? They're sitting with the words. And I really, like, always say, call me if you have any, because I want to work with the actors, because they always, TV, you do it so quickly, but TV, it's, you want it to, if you give it time, it can get so great. And that's the scene where, yeah.
So everybody knows it's in the Heart Universe. My big crush is Pascal Hutton. That's my girl. Hi, Pascal. So I love her. She's my girl. Rosemary. Speaking of change, also from when she first came on, what she's turned into. Her and Lee, that storyline arc this season 2, and having the baby, and then shocking us with the whole motherless story. That was amazing too. I'm sure for you guys, right, and you ladies in the writers, that must have been very interesting to write, because it's like we're talking about femalehood, having babies, not having babies, having a mother leave, a mother die. So we learned some of the other people had their stories too a little bit. It was wonderful. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we were trying to figure out how, baby stories can be challenging, right? Because babies don't do a lot. And I worked on a show. I actually got hired to be a female writer on a show because they had a baby. They're like, oh, well, you're,
Okay.
And I actually did have a baby, but still. But I remember thinking, what story? Exactly. Right. I'm like, what are we going to do with this? But so how do you do a baby story? Because we had the amazing episode where little Jack is born. And so somebody suggested, well, what if she had like a touch of, I think the idea was postpartum. And I thought, well, that's tricky, because it's just, for me on a show like this, you don't want to do things that just sort of end depressingly, right? Like, can we bring it up? Can we, like, what's the, because I want to watch TV that brings me up, right? And so, and then we sort of kept talking about it, and then I'm a motherless daughter and a motherless mother.
Okay.
And a friend of mine had said, come to this book reading, and there's this book, and she said, motherless daughters and a motherless mother. And I didn't even know there was such a thing. And I just remember it hit me like, oh, I'm not alone. Right. And so we heard Hope Edelman is the author, just reading at a bookstore, because it was, when authors do these book readings. And it just stayed with me. And so then we by pulling that in, and then we also get to tell the story of healing. So, and it's so tricky. I mean, every mom who's, it's especially motherless mothers, it's just raising kids. I mean, you're a parent, raising kids is a lot. There's a lot of, there can be bumps.
That's an understatement. My oldest daughter just turned 36 a couple days ago. And I'm like, first of all, how are you 36? I'm only 37, so I don't know how you're 36. But no, we talked about our past a little bit. Just kind of, it was tough. There's times it was tough, and there was times I was not perfect. I did the best I could. See, I had not a good father, so he's alive, just wasn't good. So my basic job was, and her mother was the same way. Both were just like, we're gonna give you a better childhood than we had. So I guess I could almost relate to the mothers to say, even though my father's alive, just not in my life. It was like, I'm going to do the things that I couldn't get from my father. And she told me that I did. I cried again. She told me. I started crying. She told me. And she said, "No, because you achieved it. You did. You were good. You were really good to us, and you were there for all the track meets and the volleyball games." And I was like, "Okay, I just want to make sure." I was like, I know it wasn't perfect. And she's a parent now. I mean, I'm a grandfather. She's a parent too. So it's like, I'm watching her parent, and I'm like reassuring her it's not perfect. Just you love your kids, and then to me that's all that matters. So you love, that's the basis of everything. As long as you're earnestly trying to show them love and protection, the rest is all, as you know, whatever that is. So and kids have their own personality, so you know that too. But yeah, so the Mother's Day, I just love that the trunk and you're right, there was healing, and there was like this, and naming her gold, short golden story. I thought it just wonderful. That just was a wonderful storyline. And you guys did what When Calls to Heart does. I mean, to me, it's classic When Calls to Heart. So I just want to say thank you for that. So okay, I mean, there are other little storylines, but we have to get to the big one that everybody talks about. And I'm Team Elizabeth. Like I said, I'm always Team Elizabeth. That's what I'm Team Elizabeth for. I'm a Hardy for life. I'm wearing my Texas Hardys. Love you guys. Wearing my Hardy shirts. I meet up with Hardys all the time and things like that. I love it. I felt like, actually, I was happy. I said it on my shows already. I stand by this. I said the only thing I was unhappy about, I thought Jack's headstone should have been bigger. I always keep saying that because he was like a big star, he was a big hero. No, but I was glad we got to see that. And I don't know your thoughts on this. My thoughts were, because I've lost someone who I was with, and it can seem like you're okay at first. The thing, grief comes in stages. Grief informs actions and stuff. I felt like Elizabeth was doing the same thing, right? She's kind of going through she thought this and maybe that, but it's about her and Jack. That was her love of her life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel. So I wonder, for you guys as writers, when you're writing this arc, you know the fans and all of that. So how easy or hard was it for you to still write the story you wanted to write?
You mean for the romance and all that?
Yes. Well, I want to say mainly for it, because to me it's Elizabeth. I mean, the other guys, they're there, but to me the basics, it's Elizabeth. You're writing a story for her, right? Am I wrong or right? I think you're writing it for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like,
no, I mean, we really assumed coming into the season that we'd just be, following up and doing, just keeping on that journey. And then as we sort of dug into this, the enormity of the choice to get married and how that's so different than everything that comes before it, especially if you've been through a wedding, it's very different.
Yes.
And she had the trauma of, and so we were going back, watching a lot of episodes, trying to pull those threads and and following her journey, and it just felt like this was the story that made sense. And then there's a huge consideration around the fans and expectations, and making sure that nothing we do felt like it was contradicting, and we knew that people would be disappointed,
of course, right?
And that's we'd never want that, but it did feel like this gave Lucas so much to do and expanded his character. And not that was, just as sort of like a piece of it, but it was her, somebody who just was always on a journey to follow her heart. This felt like this was a way to really tell the original, the story of the show.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I just felt like we're following her. So whether it's this person or that person or this person or that person or best friends, her and Rosemary had problems last season, a couple seasons ago, and I like we're watching her story because Elizabeth's not perfect, right?
I don't know about that, but
I love her. She's the best teacher on earth. That's my thing. But I like that she's fallible. I like that she's somebody who she's not. We put her on a pedestal, then she can't have a story. To me, like isn't that part of the writing thing? Like if you make them so perfect, then you can't go anywhere with them, right?
yeah, yeah. No, and you could have good intentions all the time, and life comes at you, right? She didn't choose to, be a widow. So I think it's, and I think most of us have good intentions all the time, right?
Right,
Like I never go out in the world and do
right,
something,
right,
right?
right.
And I think that, yeah, but then life comes at you, and then you are sometimes in life, and this isn't really this story, but I
Right,
do
right,
find
right,
in
right.
life you can be the choice is a bad choice and a worse choice, right? Now, what do you do? And you don't understand, of course, when you're young, but as you get older, you realize there are bad choices and worse choices and terrible choices, right? And then you just take what's the best version. It's like, but that has nothing to do with,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but no, I think that it's always a tricky thing to put the characters under pressure.
Yeah.
And it's a great book about it, actually. Well, it's a silly book, but it's funny. It's a memoir of a TV writer who took over Cheers for the last season. And
Oh,
conversations with my agent, and it may be ridiculous and it might be hilarious. I read it like 10 years ago, but I remember he kept drawing this comparison that is that writers want to write Daffy Duck, and their bosses want them to write Mickey. Because
okay.
right, because Daffy's always getting in trouble and Mickey's
Yes,
just sweet,
always.
nothing
Yeah.
happens.
Yes.
But we love Mickey and
Yeah.
Goose. So, total, but to just to your point, yeah, it's like you both want to put pressure and conflict, but you don't want to hurt your character. So it is hard.
Yeah, it's tough. But I want to make sure. Like I said, that's why I was like talking about the process of the show, how we get to the writing, because like I say, it's just not nothing's done in a vacuum. And I'm glad you said that. The shows know. Like I said, I work in soaps and other TV genres. I work in Star Wars stuff. We all know when a storyline happens, some fans will be this way. You already know that already, but you have to tell them. But you have a story you want to tell, and so you're trying to tell that story. And you're like, that's kind of the point. We're telling you a story. We're trying to keep the integrity of it. We know some folks are not gonna like it, and some will like it, but that's just how shows are. I mean, nothing's again, it can't be perfect. Nothing can be perfect. You can't please every single person on earth. I always say 10 people can watch the show 10 different ways. I mean, that's just how it is.
Right. And I think the show's made us care so much about the characters that it's like, I'm crying. My husband was crying during several of the episodes.
Oh. We do, and that's the thing. We do. We love the characters. We are feeling for them. We've watched them. Some of them 7 seasons, 8 seasons, 9 seasons, 10 seasons on the show, and you do. And so you guys realize like we do. We get there's attachment. And again, I said I come from other things where when you're on a lot, they're brought into your living room, they're brought into your bedroom, they're brought into your kitchen wherever you watch TV. They're there with you.
Right.
That's just kind of how it is. I just love it. But I just want to, for me, I'm Team Elizabeth. I've always said that. I feel like that's the journey we're watching. Yes, Nathan and Lucas have journeys too, which you guys do, which is showing. And so I feel like with her, I was kind of glad it kind of was brought back to her on some level.
Mhm.
And when it came to the Jack stuff, what was the decision to touch on that, because that was obviously a touchy subject what season 5 and 6 when it all went down. How mindful were you when you say, okay, we're gonna put this in the script, show her at the gravesite, which I loved, that kind of stuff. What was the thought behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm so glad you're asking, because I hadn't really thought about it the way you're asking. But it sometimes in a writer's room, right? We're on Zoom, right? There's
Yeah.
6 or 7 of us, depending, and somebody will throw out an idea, and then it really just takes life, right? It takes on a life of its own, and then you want to do it again in that case, and it was like, wow, she would have a relationship. She would go visit the grave. Why haven't we, like, let's show that. And this moment where everything is changing and she's reflecting on her, this first wedding, because the second wedding is coming up. So, and then, as I said, like, it felt so right that she would be talking to him and that he would be her confidant. And also how beautiful that she can have that connection to him, and that she goes, not just, tends his grave, but also that she's feeling connected to him, even in the tragedy of it.
It felt realistic to me. It felt real. I mean, many of us talk to our departed loved ones for stuff. We do. We talk to them, and it's like, and if something new is coming up that's kind of related to that, so she has her best friend Rosemary, and we saw those scenes. But yeah, you should go to Jack and kind of like, hey Jack, here's what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. What's going on? I just thought it was so realistic, and I think that many of us who've lost someone can relate to that on some level. Because it goes years. It doesn't. I mean, there's the grief process doesn't just end, one season, so to speak, and that's it. And I'm glad you guys brought it back. I feel like you brought it back to that a little bit. The show started out as the teacher and the Mountie,
Right.
that's the whole thing. It's evolved more from that. But I just love that you brought it back a little bit. There were many things this season I thought you brought it back as this town is expanding.
Mhm. And I also love the idea that he is a comfort to her, like that she, she has her son, so she has to be. I mean, it's like you have to be so strong as a parent, right? You can't cry, like you have to do that alone, right?
Yes.
But that so she's so strong, and but he can also be there for her because of his memory. So yeah.
Now, one of the fun things I want to talk about is before we wrap up. I can talk to you forever. You're great. Thanks for your time. The town's expanding, and we're going further into the 20s. So, how much fun is that when it comes to costuming? What things look like? We got horses and cars, and the hairstyles and all that. The fashion. Obviously, folks at home, not everything is super true to nature, because a lot of them have dirty faces and all kind of. We're not doing true to nature. There's a little bit of fantasy in there, but you guys are kind of bringing the radio in. How much fun is that, adding that into the scripts last season?
It's amazing, because you start to think, okay, what in this year, or this time could things pop up? It's so much fun. I mean, that's why it's so fun to write a period show, and you don't get to do them very often.
Oh.
And yeah, and changing the hemlines, and I love all the wardrobe. I just think Barbara's brilliant, and I find that the whole show is it's so much about community and love and friendship and everybody, and there's a real, like, everybody lives in the same type of house, right? A row house. And but then they wear these amazing gowns. And I feel like there's this that, like, what, we can all get, we can have nice things, but what, let's live in like this real communal way, but we can also have nice things. And I think that to me, that really speaks to me.
Yeah, well, like Rosemary, for sure, we knew because of her past, she would have all these dresses, and that's just very her. But you're right, everybody else like, how do you get that? No, I love it. I just think it's kind of cool when in the background you see a gas station. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, now we have an infirmary. Like one scene, then we get the phone one scene. Like it's funny that we get to have that. But it was the traffic thing made me laugh this season. It was like, oh my god, it was like there's cars, and they're like, that would be a trip, and a horse and buggy and a car. I mean, it's it would be.
I love that, the traffic jam episode.
Yes, that was hilarious. I mean, I live in LA, so I'm like, I know how traffic jams are. But I thought that was really funny that we're seeing. And they said bring the radio in. That was a big deal to bring the radio in, and start to broadcast, and them starting a paper, and that was a big deal too. I'm like, it's kind of fun to see that, and I figured you guys were having a good time with that, and seeing Fiona's hairstyles. She's always part of the times. The ladies and the guys, the clothes, and how they started to change that too. It's a lot of fun. So it's a lot of fun.
And of course, I grew up without cell phones, computers.
Same here. Same here.
So like when the first Sony Walkman, of course, my cousin got it. I was like, what? So I remember those moments of being in awe of technology.
Yes, me too, girl. Me too. I was talking about the other day. My first cell phone was a Sony Ericsson. There's this giant thing with the antenna, the flip phone antenna.
Yeah.
Hi, it was like this big. Hi, I'm James. Yeah, can I call you later? My minutes are up. I can't talk to you right now. I go to the weekends. Okay, got it. Like it was crazy. And then AOL was sending you the little CDs so you could just like I remember all that. I remember all that stuff. It's crazy. We were like that. We were like that last generation that actually remembers all of that and seeing this stuff come in. So it's kind of fun. Miss Lindsay, thanks for being on the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
You're welcome anytime to come back. We have a season 11, folks. Season 11 is happening. They've already been filming it. I think they're middle production still, I think. So it's coming, folks. At the time of this interview, it's coming. It's already set in stone. We love it. When season 12, when it doesn't. We want that. So, but thanks for all your hard work. Like I said, I want people to know that doing shows like this is not easy. It's a team effort. It's a lot of hours, a lot of work, a lot of thought. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm James Lott Jr. You can follow me on where all James Lott Juniors are everywhere. But also, I have after shows for the shows all the way back to season 3, I believe. So they're on my channel, YouTube, JLJ Media, or you can listen to me on any kind of like podcast because my voice is really great. You can go to any, like Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you can go out. And I made it so simple. It's just the When Calls the Heart After Show. No fancy names. It's just that. Find it. You can watch or listen. I have tons of interviews from people in the past. And with Brian Bird, of course, every season we sit down all the time. But check those out. Tell me what you think. I love the comments. Love talking to you. Hearties around the world, come see me, talk to me, message me all the time. Let's have a good time. Let's talk and have fun. But thanks for watching the show with us tonight, and we will see you next season.